He commanded the most powerful empire on earth. He wrote the most disciplined philosophy ever recorded. He was called the last good emperor, and his greatest failure slept in the room next to his. Marcus Aurelius spent 30 years mastering his own mind, 30 years documenting every battle he fought against ego, impulse, and desire. And the boy who watched him do all of that grew up to become the most destructive ruler Rome ever produced. His name was Commodus. And this is the most disturbing contradiction in the history of philosophy. Because if everything Marcus believed could not reach his own son, what does that tell us about those beliefs? What does it tell us about ourselves? Stay with me. The answer is not what you expect. Marcus Aurelius never wanted the throne. He was chosen, placed into a chain of succession that handed the weight of an entire civilization to a man who preferred books to banquets. When the burden arrived, he did not celebrate. He went home and wrote. Those private journals became what we now call the Meditations, and if you read them honestly, they are not the words of a man at peace. They are the words of a man in daily combat, with impatience, with arrogance, with the pull toward comfort. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he wrote, not as wisdom already mastered. As a reminder he still needed every morning. This was the father Commodus grew up watching, not a symbol, a man who struggled visibly, failed quietly, and returned to the work regardless. And somehow, that was not enough. Commodus was born in 161 AD, the first emperor born while his father already ruled. From his first breath, power was not something to earn, it was simply the air around him. Early accounts describe a charming boy, quick to smile, physically striking. But his tutors noticed something underneath. While Marcus debated philosophy for hours, Commodus wanted gladiators. While his father studied at dawn, the boy disappeared to the stables. This was not yet cruelty. This was a child who found the weight of his father too heavy to carry. Marcus brought Commodus on military campaign into the brutal reality of the Germanic wars, specifically to show him what empire actually cost. Not the marble, the blood, the frozen ground. He wanted his son to feel the weight of it. But Commodus looked at those campaigns and saw only distance between himself and Rome, between himself and everything he believed he deserved. In 177 AD, Marcus named Commodus co-emperor. His son was 16, and Marcus knew. The historical record makes this painfully clear. He had been warned by advisors, by generals, by men who had watched the boy closely and seen what was forming inside him. They told him directly, "Do not do this." And Marcus, the philosopher who wrote endlessly about clear judgment and seeing reality without self-deception, chose not to see. Some historians argue it was political, that a disputed succession was more dangerous than a flawed heir. Others argue it was something far more human. He was a father, and fathers, even the most disciplined ones, find it nearly impossible to accept the full truth about their children. Marcus could meditate on death without flinching. He could govern through plague and betrayal without losing his footing. But looking at his son and admitting, "This child is beyond my reach," that was the one thing the most rational mind in Roman history could not bring himself to do. If this is making you see stoicism differently, not as a solution to everything, but as something with real human limits, you're thinking about it more honestly than most people ever will. That's what this channel is here for. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. Marcus died in 180 AD, and the moment he was gone, Commodus abandoned the wars his father had spent years fighting. In a single afternoon, he returned to Rome, and the mask dissolved completely. Within months, Marcus's closest advisors had been executed, the same men who had warned the emperor about his son. They were the first to go. Then came the purges, the paranoia, senators removed without cause. The empire Marcus had carefully held together began fracturing at its edges. But that was not the darkest part. Commodus became convinced, genuinely, that he was the reincarnation of Hercules. He fought in the gladiatorial arena. He renamed Rome after himself. The Senate began recording his official titles in state documents and then quietly erasing them, because writing his name felt like participation in something they had no words for. This continued for 12 years. Now here is the question nobody asks. What did Marcus Aurelius get wrong? Not as a father, as a philosopher, because this story exposes something Stoicism rarely confronts. Discipline cannot be inherited. It cannot be passed down. It cannot be demonstrated into someone. It must be chosen freely, individually, by the person who needs it. Marcus could write the most penetrating moral philosophy ever recorded and live it with remarkable consistency. But he could not make that choice for his son. The world Commodus grew up in made that choice nearly impossible from the start. Every impulse answered before it finished forming. Every desire fulfilled before it could teach him anything. No friction, no delay, no earning. The Stoics believed discomfort was not something to merely endure. It was the forge that built genuine character. Commodus never stood in that forge, and Marcus, for all his wisdom, could not find a way to place him there. So what do we take from this? Not that Stoicism fails. What it reveals is something more precise and more demanding. It only works for the person who actively chooses it, not the person whose father lived it, not the person surrounded by the right ideas, the person who wakes up, feels the pull toward comfort, and moves in the opposite direction anyway. Marcus understood this about himself. That is why he kept those journals, not to teach, but to hold himself to a standard he kept almost reaching. His tragedy was believing that living near that standard would somehow be enough for someone else. It never is. The work cannot be absorbed by proximity. It has to be done by you, in the choices that feel too small to matter, in the mornings when the easier path is right there, and you take the other one. That is the only real separation between a life of discipline and a life of Commodus. Not bloodline, not philosophy on the shelf, not a brilliant father, just the choice. Yours, made again today. If this landed somewhere real, if you've been surrounded by the right ideas and still find yourself choosing the easier path, you already know what needs to change. It's not more content, it's the decision. Drop one word in the comments, the one thing you keep choosing over the hard path. Just one word. And if you want to keep exploring the parts of Stoic history that most channels never touch, subscribe, because the story of Marcus Aurelius doesn't end here, and neither does yours.